Hello, everybody. Welcome. Happy lunchtime, snack time, wherever you are. If you want to come off camera and say hello, feel free. We're just letting people in. So while we're letting people in, I'll do a quick introduction, and Lena can just click all the buttons in the background. So my name's Carly Richmond. I'm one of your lovely hosts today for this Aspiring Speakers Lunchtime Lightning Talks. I've also got not Barry, Anthony, who's off camera at the moment, and we've also got Lena as well. So for anyone, is anyone this their first time and they've never been before? I see a lot of familiar faces. Emilia, cool. So, just to give a quick rundown of how this works, this is intended as a safe space to practice, giving presentations. They can be technical, they can be on any particular theme within reason, but it's an opportunity to practice presenting a topic, potentially handling Q&A, and all those other things that make public speaking, quite frankly, a little scary, but in front of a nice, friendly audience. So thankfully, we have Rickworks who help us with a lot of the kind of posting and the hosting today as well. So we need to say thanks to them as well. And we have three awesome aspiring speakers today who are going to take to the virtual stage. So feel free to kind of, give them their time and, patience as they're presenting. Feel free to ask questions when they speak. We've got time for that too. And we've actually got, due to a dropout, one slot left. So we have a backup to fill it. But if anyone wants to do one and is like, oh, I've got something I'd like to try, let me know. Just ping me in the chat in the background and we can get that organized. But we've got three fab speakers today. We have Amelia, we've got Jad, and we've got Isaac. And Amelia has kindly agreed to go first. So, Amelia, do you want to share your screen?
Yeah, sure. Just give me 1 second. Okay. Hopefully you can see it. Okay. So my name is Emilia Brennan. My day job is in technology risk. And nowadays, every day, our attention is pulled into countless direction. And this session explores how understanding your own operating system can help you cut through the noise and focus on what truly matters. So I want to start with a question. Have you ever reached the end of the day or thought, I've been really busy today, but what is it that I actually move forward? Or I really want to do something, but then you had those thoughts of, I'm too busy, I'm not ready, I need to do X, Y, and Z first, and you never get round to it. I know I have. And a recent personal example for me was creating an actual physical photo album with family pictures that have been sitting on my phone for years. It was a simple task, something I genuinely wanted to do, yet weeks turned into months. And not because I didn't care or I didn't have the capabilities, but because life kept running in the background. Work, notifications, responsibilities, life admin, the endless to-do list competing for my attention. And it made me think. Most of us don't have productivity problem. We have an operating system problem as we keep trying to improve the outputs without understanding what's running underneath it. I think I skipped one. And think about your computer for a moment. So when it starts running slowly, it's rarely because it's broken. Usually, it's because there are too many things running at the same time in the background and it just needs an update. The modern world feels exactly that. We constantly connected. There's always another article to read, another podcast to listen, another post, LinkedIn post explaining the latest trends. And recently, AI has amplified the feeling for you, the feeling, and you need to learn more about it. Every day there's a new demand and to-do things added to your list. And underneath, this is a fear many of us will recognize. What if I fall behind? What if everyone else understands and I don't? And everyone else seems to be doing it so easily. So we keep consuming, we keep reading, we keep searching, and we keep adding more tabs onto already overloaded operating system. And the problem isn't information. The problem is that we rarely create space to process it. And this is where knowledge without reflection simply becomes just a noise. Activity is not productivity. Information doesn't equal understanding. One thing I notice is that we often mistake consuming information for making progress. Example I often think of is analyzing a data. We can spend hours looking at set of data, but what is the outcome of it? What do we actually get at the end of it? Reading about leadership isn't leadership. Reading about AI isn't really using AI. Learning and staying informed matters, but at some point we have to stop downloading more information and start processing it, because otherwise our operating system will become full of updates we never actually installed. Sometimes the most productive question isn't what else do I need to learn? It's what do I already know that I haven't acted on upon just yet? One thing I've realized is that effectiveness is incredibly personal thing. Productivity is not about doing more. It's about understanding yourself and intentionally directing your attention and taking the next small steps that matter the most for you. What works brilliantly for one person can completely drain another. Some people think best by talking, others need quiet space. Some drive on structure, and others need flexibility. Yet we often spend our time trying to work like someone else instead of understanding how we naturally operate. Think about the last time you felt energized. What were you doing? Who were you working with? Now think about the last time you felt completely drained. There's usually a clue in that difference. High performance aren't necessarily working harder. Very often, they simply working in a way that aligns with how they operate best. Understanding your operating system is not self-indulgent. It's practical because once you understand how you work, you can make better decisions about where your attention goes. Another important element is that when people think about a change, they often think big, a complete reset, a new routine, something very different. It's almost like a new operating system. But real change doesn't start that way. It starts with one simple update, one thing to stop, one thing to start, or one thing to protect. It might be protecting 30 minutes of your focus time, maybe switching all the notifications for part of the day. Maybe it's finally taking first step on something you've been postponing for a long time. The goal isn't transformation overnight. The goal is the momentum. Small actions create the clarity. Clarity creates the confidence, and that confidence will then create the progress. If you think of athletes, no one wakes up and decides that they want to do a marathon. And if they do, I want to know how they do it. They start slowly. They start with a jog and then they build up on that. I would like to leave you with one final thought. Most of us don't need another productivity hack. We don't need more complicated systems. We need to look at the systems we're already running. What's taking up the space? What's running in the background? What no longer deserves our energy? What needs clearing out? And what is the one thing that deserves your full attention? Because productivity is not about doing more. It's about creating space for what matters most. So this week, don't try to change everything. Reflect on your operating system and make one small update. And you might be surprised how much faster and clearer things start to feel for you. Thank you.
Thanks, Amelia. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Does anyone have any questions for Amelia at all?
I've got a question, if that's okay. Amelia, I mean, it's really good. I took loads of notes.
Thank you.
And it seems like such a simple idea that productivity doesn't mean going faster or adding more stuff. Is actually just refining what you're doing.
Yeah.
Do you have any kind of small examples where you've applied this and it's
Yeah.
worked for you?
So for me, it's really important how I start my day. And when I started in a calm way, I feel like I'm really structured and calm for the rest of the day. So I don't look at my phone first thing in the morning. I wake up and I try to look through the window. And again, I think we often put pressure on ourselves and we think like, oh my God, I need 15 minutes in the morning to chill out and set myself for the day. But even if it's a minute or two, you aim slowly, you aim for small little steps and then build up on it. So I would say for me, it's about starting the day and also recognizing when things are becoming a little bit mad and knowing that I need to take that 5 minutes pause because I'm just caught in the middle of something and I'm not actually achieving what it is that I want to do. But taking that 5 minutes out will actually make it more efficient in long term.
That's fantastic. Thank you.
Thanks.
Cool. Are there any other questions for Amelia? If not, I can ask one. Okay, I can ask mine then. So I wondered, given what you'd said about, the kind of theme of the personal operating system and kind of trying to identify the things that you actually should be working on. I
Yeah.
wondered if you had any tips and guidance on notifications, because that's something that I see a lot of people struggling with, and I've had my own experiences that I've optimized for, where those can, those notifications, like particularly from Slack or emails or things, can like derail your workday and you end up not focusing on the big things you were intending to. So do
Yeah.
you have any particular tips on how you handle notifications?
So I think it's again recognizing, identifying which one is the biggest challenge for you.
Hmm.
So, for example, for me, I think it's really easy to get caught up with scrolling on your phone and you think, oh, I need to research this thing, I need to send this email, I need to do this. I leave my phone in a different room. So all my WhatsApp, all my messages are silent, but the phone can only ring. So if people around me know that if they need me urgently, they will ring, I will pick up the phone. But by keeping it in a different room, I'm just not distracted by it. I think it's the same thinking about my day-to-day working life. Again, it's really easy to start looking at the emails, but I think really focusing on that one task that you're going to be doing for the next 20 minutes or so helps you block everything that's happening around. But I think similar to what Lena was saying, all of those things sound really simple, but it's putting practice and really putting that theory to your day-to-day ways of working that will help you build out those habits that work particularly for you.
Cool. Makes sense. Thank you very much. All right, one more round of applause for Amelia, please.
Thank you.
Cool. Awesome. Right. So, Jad, you're up next. Do you want to share your screen?
Yes, thank you very much. Just one sec, bear with me. And you should be able to see my screen, right?
Yeah, we can. So when you're ready, off you go.
All right. All right. So my name is Tejal Omeri. I'll be talking about reinventing yourself. And just a small note is I'm not a psychologist, not a life coach by any means. This is just my personal story, and it's going to be emotional. So let's start. Reinventing yourself without losing yourself. I think when people talk about reinventing yourself, it can sound like you need to become a completely different person. And I don't think that's true. I think the real challenge is much harder than that. It is not changing everything. It is knowing what must change and what must remain the same, what you're willing to really sacrifice in order to remain the same. Now let's talk about the core. I think real reinvention starts with a real, very honest conversation with yourself. Who am I really? Behind the titles, behind the job, behind the interests, behind all the things that people see from the outside. What am I willing to change? And what are the things I would sacrifice everything to preserve? Because we do change, we grow, we evolve, but there's something inside us, our core, that matters. And I think the danger is when people confuse reinventing themselves with losing themselves. So let me tell you about when I lost my dream. For a big part of my life, I was a startup guy, a builder, someone who loved taking ideas from scratch, from 0 to 1. I spent 5 years building Sports Session, a sports coaching marketplace. We scaled it to 1,500 coaches, but unfortunately, we couldn't get to product market fit. We just couldn't get the economics to work. And eventually, I had to give up that dream. That startup was my baby, and I had to just give it up. And around the same time, I was going through divorce, I was going through grief. So it wasn't just a company that ended, it was my whole identity that was shattered, that was shaken. I had to ask myself, if I'm not this startup, if I'm not this person, if I'm not this version of myself anymore, then who am I? And that's when I realized that reinventing yourself doesn't always start with excitement, it sometimes starts with loss. And then I wrote a letter to myself, to my heart. It sounds very strange. Most people, I didn't tell this story to many people, but those who have heard it, it sounds very strange. But that was one of the most important moments of my life. I was at one of the lowest points in my life. I had to decide what pain was allowed to change in me and what it was not allowed to touch. And I made a promise to myself, no matter how many times I got hurt, no matter how many heartaches, I would not change the way I love. And I would not just become cold just because life gave me reasons to. And I think this is such an important part of reinvention. Because some people think reinvention is becoming harder, becoming tougher, becoming less emotional and less trusting. But sometimes reinvention is having the courage to stay soft. And now, years later, I married the most amazing woman, the most supportive woman, the most loving woman I could have ever dreamed of. And for years, I wondered if any day I would be able to find that person who would see me for what is just beyond the appearances. And thanks to that letter, that honesty with myself, I was able to find that woman. And now let's talk about changing forms. After startups, I realized I needed stability. Startup life can be amazing, it can be exciting, but it's also scarcity, it's also pressure, no money, grinding, evenings, weekends. Even at one point, I was just looking through my the days I had worked more days than there is in a year. So I decided to take a stable job. I joined Mu as a senior software engineer, and I still remember the recruiter and hiring manager who were asking me how I could go from CTO and co-founder to senior software engineer. They just didn't believe I could make that transition. And the answer is I reinvented myself, not by becoming less, but by just learning how I could change the way I make my impact into a different environment. And that was my reinvention. Nothing too fancy, but real reinvention. And then outside work, running and kickboxing became big parts of my identity. Then I got injured, I hurt my knee, and I couldn't run or kickbox for 6 months. And I had this identity crisis. If I'm not a kickboxer, if I'm not a runner, then who am I? And I quickly realized my identity was not really about the activity itself, it was about the discipline. So I trained differently, trained my upper body, did calisthenics, took physio very religiously, and I rebuilt. And 6 months later, I was back running and I was hitting personal bests again. But at the same time, during that time, there was something really heavy going on in my life. My country was going through war, Lebanon and Palestine were suffering, and I was living somewhere where I felt like nobody cared. And that was honestly one of the hardest periods of my life. And my reinvention here was to take the things that I had, running, fighting, discipline, and turning them into my fight for justice. And I won my boxing fight. I won top fundraiser on the night, but what was most important to me is that I was fighting helplessness, my very own helplessness. I was fighting silence, and I was fighting the feeling that I could do nothing. And now, very important note on community. I hope there's some people from Albany Road Run Club listening to this. So one thing that I have learned is that reinvention is not something, thank you, is not something we do alone. That yes, there's this inner conversation we need to have with ourselves, but we also need people. Since moving to Cardiff, Albany Road Run Club had become one of the most welcoming and supportive communities in my life. Now I'm not just a runner, I'm a runner who's part of a running club. And that matters because sometimes people help you become yourself again without even realizing it. They just show up, they make space for you, they make you feel like you belong. And when you're trying to rebuild, belonging is powerful. And then I lost myself, I lost my voice. That was a few months ago. I was made redundant from Moo after restructuring, and I had no idea what I would be doing next. At Moo, I learned a lot, I grew technically, and I'm very grateful for that chapter. But I also lost some things. Before Moo, I was a CTO and co-founder. I was used to speaking in front of a board. I was used to speaking with CEOs. I used to be part of a panel helping startup founders for free. But over time, over 3 years, I started feeling like an imposter. I started telling myself, I'm not a startup guy anymore. I'm just someone who used to do that. And then I found myself in this group. I was just listening to other people speak with courage, and I was very nervous. I'm currently nervous. You might not see it. I didn't know what I would be talking about. I just submitted the form anyway, and I chose the topic reinventing yourself without even knowing how I would reinvent myself this time. I just knew that there was something that I wanted to share. And here we are, somehow. It's the 30th of June. I promise you, there's no way I would have timed this. I'm launching a new thing, Regrow. It's launching tomorrow, and I did not plan it. But one thing I can say is that Regrow is not random. It's the evolution of Sports Session. It's the evolution of Beyond Scopes. It's the evolution of myself. And it's still me building, still helping, still starting from zero, and still trying to speak up, be brave, and make a difference. And that is what reinvention means to me. And one last thing, if there's just one thing that I would want you to take away from this talk is just change the form as many times as you want, but really work hard on keeping your core the way it is.
Thank you so much, Ed. And I love that you'd said obviously you joined this before and you're like, oh no, I'll give it a go this time because that's exactly what this group is for, you know. Coming in, seeing other people doing it, and then having the courage to give it a go. So I love that part of your message. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Does anyone have any questions for Jad at all?
Not a question, but more of an observation. I love seeing other Cardiffians on here, and I don't think it's ever happened that we've had two people from Cardiff on the call. So, yeah, it'd be great. Maybe I'll bump into you on Welford Road. I think I recognise that corner, that picture, the location.
Yeah, definitely. Let's meet in real life. That would be awesome.
Yeah.
Maybe we can have a first in person in Cardiff then.
Mm-hmm.
Good idea.
Cardiff
Send
is so underrated. So whenever
I've
you come here, you would love it. I promise you.
I've never been sadly, but I've heard lovely things.
Hmm.
Cool. Okay. Isaac, you ready?
Ready as I'll ever be.
Cool. Go for it. Let's share
PyCon's
your
usually
screen.
hosted in Cardiff, and we love going there. So it's yeah, definitely definitely recommend. Can you all see that?
Yep.
And then check your slide. Okay, cool. Ready. Hello. Today I'm going to tell you a story about how I accidentally reinvented queues. So I'd like to start with a quick statistic. Did you know that the average Brit will spend 47 days queuing over their lifetime? Curve Kiosks commissioned a survey of 2,000 adults in 2019 that revealed that the average Brit will spend 51 minutes waiting in line each week. And I think that's brilliant because us Brits love queuing. So, we get to do what we enjoy, which hopefully leads in nicely to this story. Little bit of background. So this story takes place in 2016. I was at university. I knew nothing about coding or anything, and I was just trying to teach myself Python. And the way I ended up doing this was by trying to write a piece of software to buy a pair of shoes. That full talk is on YouTube if you want to watch that, but this kind of takes place just after that. So me and my friends were at university, and I was very much just like kind of fumbling around on my laptop, figuring out what this kind of software thing was about. And yeah, towards the end of kind of the story, this is where we were at. We had a JSON file with some orders that we were going to place. So that was like the shoes that we wanted, the size, how many, our address, payment information, etc. That would get passed to this script that would wait until these shoes were going to be released, and then we'd try and buy them. So that's the background. What's the problem we're trying to solve? This was the current architecture of the script. Basically involved, I was manually adding orders to this JSON file, which meant I was like having to type everything out, making sure that I didn't have any errors, that all the IDs were right, etc., etc. I would then wait until the shoes were going to be released and then trigger the script. And the problem with this is, whenever you do manual work, it takes ages, but also you can make errors and then things are going to break down the line. I didn't know about error handling, so I was trying to stop that at the source. So what I wanted to do is I wanted to automate this step. I spoke with a couple of other people on my course, and they basically suggested about building a web app. That way that we could put that to our people that were going to submit these orders, and then that would then write the JSON file automatically. I wouldn't have to do any of that. It would save me time and hopefully less errors. So we did that. Now, during development, obviously I'm just entirely working on my laptop here. I don't know about anything else. And that was all well and good when it was just me and my housemate, because I could just get him to come down to my bedroom. But once we kind of got things working a bit better, a friend on the other side of campus wanted to get involved. And he didn't want to walk across campus to use the web app. He was like, I don't use websites on other people's laptops. Can you make it work through the internet? So I had to learn about how that worked, and that looked like this. The idea was to put the web app in the cloud and then still have everything else running locally on my laptop. But there was a big question. How was this step going to work, basically? We had this web app in the cloud. I needed this JSON file locally. How does that work? So the requirements for the problem were these users need to be able to submit orders on this public-facing web app. This script needs to run locally on my laptop, which was currently had this JSON file locally. And of course, we want it to be as automated as possible. I want to do as little work as possible. So the first idea we had was, well, look, we've got this web app writing to this JSON file locally. Why don't we keep it like that? And then maybe I could download the file when it was time to run it, something like that. The issue with this was I was a student at university. I didn't have any money. I was using the free tier of his hosting website, which actually meant that the file system was read-only. The alternative to that was it would be like a different free tier, but it would power down when it wasn't being used. That meant that every time it restarted, it wouldn't necessarily be on the same instance, so it would wipe the file system. So basically, this wasn't going to work. Well, what if we had the JSON file locally? Because obviously that would kind of persist then, and the cloud web app could kind of write directly to it. The issue with this is the web app has no write access to my laptop, and frankly, I didn't want to give the outside world access to my laptop. I didn't know much at the time, but I knew that that was probably not the right idea. So maybe there was this middle ground. Maybe there was somewhere that kind of both places could talk to, that we could keep it, and that would kind of work nicely. So again, similar requirements. The users must be able to send orders from this public web app to this middle place. My laptop needs to be able to pick up these orders from this middle place. And a couple of other points. We want to keep it free. And I don't care about it persisting. Basically, I knew about databases, but I felt that was a bit sledgehammery because I was like, once I pick them up, don't care what happens to them. So what I settled on at the time was using emails. I'd recently learned how to send an email using Python, and I thought, you know what, that ticks all my boxes. Let's try it out. And this is the architecture basically I came up with. So in the cloud, I still had this web app, and I basically had two email accounts. I had my personal email account that I would access from my laptop, and I created a second email account that the web app could send emails with. So what would happen is an order would be placed. We would then send an email from the web app account to my personal account. So that meant on the email server, I had a whole bunch of emails from this web apps account to my personal email account, and they would just sit there until I was ready to process them. Then, like I said, when I was ready, I'd parse all the unread ones, would write that to the JSON file, etc., etc. And I thought this was working brilliantly. I thought, I'm so smart. No one's ever thought of this before. I showed a couple of people that were a little bit further along their journey of learning how to code, and they basically said, "You've built a queue." And I was like, "Oh, what's that?" So I went away and I learned a bit about queues. It turns out that not only was I using a queue, but the email server was basically acting as a message broker. But what does all this mean? What did I basically learn? So queues store messages, which in our case was our email. This was acting as our message. It's a communication between two different services. We've got our producer, which is the web app's email account, and we've got our consumer, which is my personal email account that was accessed here in my laptop. Queues can be processed asynchronously. So again, they're happy to sit on the email server as long as we want them. They're not going to go anywhere, but it's just a temporary holding place. Once we've read those emails in, they can be lost to the ether. They can be put in the bin. It doesn't matter. We're not going to go back and reference them. And just a side note, queues are typically first in, first out. So once I'd learned all this and I'd learned that maybe emails wasn't the right way to do it, or well, it worked, but maybe like in a production environment, that wasn't the best way to do it. I decided, if I had the funds and time, how would I actually go back and do it properly? And this is the architecture I basically came up with. So I would still have my application sitting in the cloud, but I could also create a queue in the cloud. That is like an Azure queue or even the service bus, whatever they have in AWS and GCP. But the web app would post a message to that queue, and then that would obviously, again, sit in the queue for as long as I needed. When I was ready, I could fire up my laptop, read those messages in, write it to the JSON file, continue as normal. And yeah, that basically sums up of how I accidentally reinvented queues and what I would do if I could do it properly next time. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you so much, Isaac. Does anyone have any questions?
I have one. What was the biggest challenge, Isaac, with all that?
Good question. Getting it all to work, getting any of it to work? No. It was, I don't know, the biggest challenge. Just dealing with like errors and like sometimes I'd read the file in. If it wasn't like exactly the right format, then as in when I'd read the email, I'd have to parse the email myself. Like I didn't put it in JSON. I did it with like colons. It's like order ID, colon this, and then if something's happened there, then it would break, and then like some of the emails would be read and some of them wouldn't be written, and get in this weird limbo state. So it ended up being like error handling, I suppose, and finding a format to send because I didn't know about JSON really. I kind of had done it for file, but I'd never clocked why didn't you send the JSON directly in the email? Didn't think about that. So I was like creating my own communication format, which again was like good to know, but like there's way easier ways to do it. So yeah, all of the issues that probably came with writing a parser to do that would be my answer.
But you persevered, so definitely a good lesson to practice
Yes.
patience. Thanks.
Oh, any other questions for Isaac at all? Nope. Okay, cool. So we have one spot left. Is anyone brave enough, without any notice, to present something. It doesn't need slides. It could be anything you want. It could be a shout out. Does anyone have anything? If not, I have something that I've thrown together with 5 minutes.
I
No?
don't have a talk, but I do want to say all three of those sessions were really, really good. Like sharing something so personal and small examples make it a lot easier for me as the listener to take something away and like action something right away. I'm already making notes of what I need to change from tomorrow. So thank you all for sharing your stories.
Oh, thank you so much, Kim. I'm sure they appreciate that. They have been really good today, I must admit. Oh, all right. Okay. I'm going to scare you all then with technical context engineering, so I'm going to warn you in advance. There's nothing inspiring about what I'm about to present, but hopefully it's useful. Right. So, can everyone see a set of slides?
Yeah.
Great. Okay. So, I've been preparing slides for a talk I've got to give for my company in a couple of weeks alongside a demo. So this gave me a good opportunity to actually have a think about this. So what I'm going to talk about is retrieval, and why it's still important, why we still need to think about it in the age of AI, because LLMs are not infallible. And I'm going to give you like a whistle-stop tour of how it's evolved from like 2020 to now. And I'm going to try and keep this as simple and straightforward as I can, because I know it's not a fully technical audience. But if anyone's got any questions or anything is explained in a really weird way and you're like, Carly, that makes no sense, please do let me know at the end. So as I said, my name's Carly, so I'm actually developer advocate lead at Elastic. I also co-host this session with lovely Lena and Anthony, who's had to dash off. But if you want to connect and chat afterwards, because I work in DevRel, I collect social media like Pokemon these days. So find me on LinkedIn, X, Blue Sky, whatever works for you. I'm happy to chat, or indeed in this aspiring speakers workspace, I'm in there as well. So what is context engineering? So I don't know if anyone's been following much of the AI stuff recently. Harness engineering is the latest buzzword that's came out. Context engineering was one before that, and then people might be familiar with prompt engineering, which was the one before that. We love buzzwords in AI. So context engineering in simple terms is part of harness engineering. So there's wider practices in harness engineering when we're building agentic systems, which is actually, I would argue some things that we should be doing as software engineers anyway. So that would be things such as CI/CD pipelines, testing, setting up evaluations, telemetry, observability, all these other kind of things. The context engineering is part of that. And actually, it's an age-old problem, which kind of we've seen in numerous systems, and actually we've seen a bit in Isaac's talk as well, is making sure that the system has the right information. You know, he needed that list of orders for his system to work properly. Context engineering is basically this for agentic systems. It's about finding the right information in order for the system to do the right thing. Okay. So, show of hands, who knows what a context window is? I wrote no. So that's fine. No worries, Amelia. So this is the number of tokens an LLM can process at once. So a token is it's not quite a word, but the way that large language models work is they take a stream of text in like one token at a time, and they're basically glorified probability generators where they'll generate the next likely token utilizing the model kind of parameters and weights that have been trained within it. So the context window is basically the maximum size, the maximum number of tokens that they can process at once. And this is important because if they can't process everything, then that means that they are going to make mistakes. They are going to, you know, have things that are wrong. They'll forget aspects of what's been sent to them and those kinds of things. So context engineering is basically utilizing different practices to say, this is what should be in the context in order for my agent to do the task that I wanted it to do. So we quite often talk about retrieval augmented generation, which I'll mention briefly in a minute, different tools that allow it access to file systems and other things, memory, but also the prompts and instructions. And we can control all these things to make sure that it's getting the right information. So who has ever had an LLM make something up and you get a response back and you're like, this isn't right? Yeah. That's good because I gave this talk, a similar talk the other week, and half the audience had their hands stuck to their side. So I'm now wondering what kind of things they were asking LLMs. Maybe I'm asking the wrong stuff. I don't know. I feel like I'm amongst good company here. So LLMs make things up for several different reasons based on the fact that they are models that are trained on large amounts of data. It can be down to the fact that they have been trained up to a particular knowledge cutoff date or not trained on information like that's proprietary to companies, so it just doesn't know the answer. It can be down to overfitting. So this is less of an issue with like frontier models that we're using, like things like, from Claude and OpenAI and everything. But overfitting in a machine learning term is basically where the parameters inside the model are really tightly coupled to the training data, so it can't adapt to your problem. There's biases in data sets in terms of not just gender, but other protected characteristics, sadly coming from the data they're trained on. Language ambiguity is still a thing as well. Anyone who's had to help teach a 6-year-old like English and deal with, phonics and all the new ways of teaching knows this all too well. And then catastrophic forgetting is where they just forget random aspects of training data completely, which is a bit scary. Now, one of the things that was surmised by some OpenAI and Georgia Tech researchers was that actually LLMs are hallucinating because they're incentivized to. So this paper from September last year outlines the idea that training and evaluation procedures have actually incentivized them to make something up rather than saying, I don't know. So if anyone's ever had to do like, obedience training for their pet and you give them a reward for particular behavior, or anyone who has children who's trying to incentivize behavior as well as a parent, we shouldn't be surprised that LLMs are the same in this regard, because if we incentivize them to make things up, they will make things up. I don't think we should be surprised. But that means we need to retrieve information, because if it has that context, it's less likely to hallucinate, right? And there's a few different ways that we can do that. So one of the original ones is something called RAG, which is retrieval augmented generation. And this utilizes semantic search. So we search based on basically numerical representation. If anyone's not sure, ask me at the end and we can go through that. And the idea is that we'll take the query from the user that they're passing into the LLM, we'll find relevant documents, and we pass that as part of the context to the large language model. But there's a couple limitations with this. The main one being that it's called exactly once. So if you need more information, you can't just go back and get more information. And also, it's called exactly once. So if you don't need information from that source, it's getting called anyway, whether you like it or not. So there's a potential cost associated with that. So we need to actually think about when we're actually retrieving information, and what's where the move to agentic RAG has happened, which is basically just the RAG we just talked about, but it's a tool. So tools are basically functions that are exposed to a large language model that it can make the decision whether to call it or not. And these functions are just functions that we write in code. They can be calling an API service, they can be pulling information out of Elasticsearch or another database. The idea is that basically we give them a definition and say, hey, LLM, here's the list of tools you've got access to, and it can make the decision whether to pull in that information into the context or not, which gives us that flexibility. But now with context engineering, it's not just about pulling stuff from databases. It can be from file systems. It can be from skills. Is anyone writing their own skills at the moment? Just me. Oh, cool. I'm not alone. That's nice. So writing skills in order to basically kind of put forward particular knowledge, web search, long-term memory, all these kinds of things. So the context is ballooning, but we still have this choice of what to call. But when it comes to tool calling, one of the problems we have is if we have too many tools, we can bamboozle the agent. So much like if we have too many choices for lunch in one day and you can have to take a moment like, oh, I don't know what I'm going to have for lunch. Basically, the idea is that agentic systems can have the same problem. If these things are not clear, then they'll potentially pick the wrong tool. They might not call any tool at all and just go, I give up. Or indeed, they might not be able to call the tool with the right parameters. So you might see a lot of retries, and all these things can factor the kind of amount of tokens we're using. They can impact the cost to run your agent, all these kinds of things. So to make them call the correct tool, a couple of things you can do is firstly, prompt engineer the tool description. Prompt engineering is not dead just because we decided that there's context engineering and there's harness engineering. So make sure you're adding in useful information such as relationships to other tools, examples so it can see the parameters, what the tool actually does, all these other capabilities. And make sure then you also reinforce it in the system prompt for the agent so it knows that these tools exist. Then also make sure you've got the right set of tools, because if you have tools that are general purpose, like this search one that I've got with high floor, high ceiling, then that's all fine and well, but those ones are more difficult to use. It might make more mistakes with passing of parameters. But if you also have stuff that's too specific, like search products, and then you want to search for, products by category or products by, an identifying number, and you don't have access to that tool, it's also not going to be able to adapt to those scenarios. So tool engineering is a big part of this as well. So in summary, context engineering is still a thing. Just because harness engineering appeared doesn't mean it's dead. And the important takeaway, even if that was a bit technically confusing, is that either through tools or through a fixed pipeline, you can pass in relevant documents. So if anyone has any questions, I'm happy to answer them. If not, guys, thank you so much. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing now. Does anyone have any questions at all?
I have a question.
Go for it.
I might have reinvented this the same way as Isaac reinvented queues. So I very much do this, and I got to a place where it's working quite well for me, but it's all like reinvented. So I've invented it myself, sort of like I have an index that holds the list of all the MD files that are specific each to one thing.
Yeah.
And but like it's all like I'm not really using any fancy tools, so I saw some screenshots while you were sharing, so I just wonder like how is the proper way of doing it rather than just the
Yeah, I think that's fair. I mean, if you're using Markdown files, you're probably starting to write skills. It's just maybe you need to tweak the format a little bit. But if you read like the Claude guides, like you just look Claude guide to writing skills, they've got a really comprehensive guide. So it sounds like your original Markdown files just maybe need a bit of tweaking, because that's effectively what a skill is. It's a Markdown file with useful context that can then be loaded in. So you're doing skills without really thinking about it, which is good. So I would definitely go down that route and see maybe you need to tweak the structure a bit and then be able to load those assets in, but that's absolutely fine. The other thing, if you didn't want to do that, is there's been a lot of discussion. There was a lot of discussion earlier in the year around LLMs being actually surprisingly good at traversing file systems. So if you just basically expose a tool for them to match, some of them already have these capabilities to pick up the relevant files. They should be able to traverse through the file structure and load in the relevant context for you, as long as they know where the information is. So I'd say keep doing what you're doing if it's working. If not, you might want to tweak it into skills, but it sounds like you've got the right idea right now. Does that answer your question?
Yep. So, thank you.
Oh, any other questions at all? No? Cool. Lena, I know you're protecting your voice, but is there anything else you want to add before we close?
No, I'm good. Well, apart from I've dropped a couple of links in the chat. So for anyone that would like to do a lightning talk, or perhaps wants to deliver another one, I think there's the link there to submit. Or if you, even if you just want to share it. Also, there's another link to give you a bit more information about the aspiring speakers group and how you can join and be part of a bigger part of it going forward.
Yes, please follow Jad's example and submit a lightning talk. We're not a scary bunch. It's a nice small lunchtime session by design. So if anyone has a talk they'd like to deliver, please do. Also, if there's any particular topics around speaking that you'd like some expert guidance in, like you'd like to learn more about CFPs and how they work, or guidance on slides, how to find topics, anything like that. We're always looking for session ideas, so just drop a note to myself and Lena if you're interested in something specifically, and we'll see if we can find relevant people to talk about that as well. Cool. Well, everyone, thank you very much for giving up your lunchtime. We really do appreciate it. And thanks again to Amelia, Jad, and Isaac for your awesome talks. Um, we'll probably not do anything in July just because it tends to be a quiet time of the year, but we'll be back out with another. I think, we've got some plans for some sessions potentially in August and September. So just keep an eye out for the group. And if you have any other suggestions, just let us know.